Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at the second critical conversation of the South African Research Chair in Cities, Law and Environmental Sustainability, a mouthful, for 2022. I'm delighted to see so many people interested in today's topic. It's heartwarming, especially since it's not so warm in some parts of the country right now. And I would like to ask you to sit back this afternoon. If you are in the audience, relax, listen to what's presented, and take the opportunity also to engage at least one of our two speakers. We will get to the format just now. Perhaps just a bit of background. I quickly looked at our participants this afternoon, and I think most of you are familiar with the work of the research chair. But for those of you who are not, at this chair, based at the Faculty of Law of the Northwest University, we are conducting research as a team of full-time researchers at doctoral, master's and postdoctoral level on issues of local governance, sustainability, the legal dynamics of urban development and urban governance. And we focus to a large degree on South Africa, but increasingly also on other African countries, as those of you following on social media may have seen. The idea with these critical conversations is to create an opportunity for as many interested people as possible to participate in a conversation, as the name suggests. So it's not formal, it's not only for academics, and it's certainly also not intended to be exclusionary in any way. And therefore, also after COVID started settling down, we decided to keep it virtual, also to have as many possible people being able to participate. So we've got two very eloquent presenters this afternoon. We are talking to a quite important topic, and that is vulnerability in the broadest possible sense. And Rongedzayi Fambasayi, who will be introduced to you shortly, we will be listening to him via video. He's in Sweden at the moment and couldn't participate in person. Well, in person. He will be talking to the vulnerability of children in the city context and how that's got a legal dimension to it. And then, for whom I'm especially grateful, Professor Catherina Schenk, who is a chair holder at the University of the Western Cape on waste and society, but she will be introduced. She will be talking more to waste service delivery and waste management, and how poor waste management also, as has been shown through their research, got vulnerability dimensions to it. So I'm not going to say anything further other than that I hope you feel welcome. And I, for the love of me, can't remember whether I introduced myself, but I am Anel du Plessis and I'm heading the chair here in Potchefstroom. And I will also be returning to facilitate the Q&A after we've had the two presentations. So with that, I'm transitioning over to Nonhlanhla Nkobo.
Many thanks, Professor No. Thank you very much. Mine is very short today. I will be introducing our speakers. Thereafter, I will transition to a video that we have from Mr. Rongedzayi Fambasayi. As Professor No has indicated, he is unable to join us today. So in order of the presentations, I will quickly just give a brief biography of Mr. Rongedzayi Fambasayi, who is known to many as a child law and governance and protection specialist. He is also a researcher at the South African Research Chair in Cities, Law and Environmental Sustainability. His research is one that has interests in critical legal perspectives on the interface of children's rights and the emerging issues such as urbanization, climate change law, artificial intelligence and smart cities. Currently, his PhD thesis is one that focuses on the nexus between children's rights regime and the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 11, of course, with a focus on children that are living within African cities. I will play an audio or a video rather of Mr. Fambasayi, but quickly, I will then also give the biography of our second speaker, who is Professor Catherina Schenk, who is the interdisciplinary the research chair holder or a chair in Western societies that is hosted by the University of the Western Cape. She brings with her more than 30 years of experience when it comes to aspects of social sciences to the chair itself. Previously, she was also the head of department in the Department of Social Work, and prior to that appointment, she was also working at the University of South Africa, as well as the University of Pretoria, which combined is more than 21 years experience. She has also supervised and co-supervised over 50 master's and PhD students, acting as examiner in many of the master's and PhD programs, and her research interests include waste management, waste recycling, community development, poverty, unemployment, and she also looks at the informal sector within the waste economy. So she's also an NRF Research Rated Chair. She's published over 80 articles in both national and international journals. She's also been an editor, co-editor, and an author of several books and book chapters. Quite an extensive and extensive experience that is coming through. But with that, allow me please to play the video given to us by Mr. Rongedzayi Fambasayi, and thereafter Professor Catherina will give her a presentation as she joins us today. Thank you.
Of city sustainable development and what is happening in our cities and municipalities in South Africa, but also in other municipalities across Africa and cities across Africa. I appreciate the organizers of this important conversation and the opportunity that you've provided me. I appreciate Duplessis, the research chair, and also I extend my appreciation to my co-presenter guest, Professor Catherina. Thank you. My name is Rongedzayi Fambasayi. I'm a PhD researcher at the South African Researcher in Cities Law and Environmental Sustainability at the Faculty of Law, Northwest University. I am also a legal and policy analyst with considerable experience working across the African continent in various capacities. And I've worked with vulnerable groups and communities in various capacities as well. And focus has been for the past years in my work and research on children, because I believe and submit and is supported by law that they are a specifically vulnerable group. And I'm excited to be joining this conversation that speaks to vulnerability on the rise, but also looking into the fit of South African law in service delivery, but also on issues that revolves around dealing with mitigating vulnerability and other conversations. I wish to specifically mention that vulnerability is an all-encompassing and cross-cutting, and it's a wide-ranging conversation, but I'll try to limit it to a case for children living in South African cities, and consider how service delivery could apply rights-based approach, but also including children because it is backed by South African law, not by my moral convictions, but it is South African law and policy providing for the need to be inclusive, but also need to include children. I also wish to make mention that part of the presentations or the arguments and submissions I make are informed by my research on inclusive cities in South Africa. I believe it's a novel research looking into how our South African cities are children. Allow me to begin by highlighting three important pillars that are the outline of my presentation. The first one is that I'm going to give a conceptual clarification on the terms that I believe are the backbone to the argument. I also try to define vulnerability, but linking it to age-based and the intersectionality of so many factors like migration status, social standing, disability, gender, and all those things that then make it more difficult for children specifically to enjoy service delivery in South Africa. Conclude by looking into law and policy, and I argue that it is children that are hidden in plain sight. The interest, the rights of children are hidden in plain sight, and it is easy for municipalities not to be child sensitive, child inclusive, and include children in governance and in service delivery. But as we get into the depth of the conversation, I want to focus your attention to the picture that is showing all different kinds of fishes. And I want you to envisage South Africa has this ocean with different kind of fishes: bull shark, catfish, lionfish, Goliath tigerfish, mackerel, so forth. And consider the vulnerability of Kapenda and mackerel small fish in a society where there is corruption, where there are people that are violating children, where there are people that are, giant in business, and their business is exposing women and children to violence. So there are so many and different ranges of vulnerability, but also of exposure that then they are exposed to. In terms of our Municipal Systems Acts, that's the beginning point, is to understand that it provides for the duties of municipalities, also duties, but focus in my presentation is on the duties of municipalities. Far above all the other duties, one key for this conversation is the provision of municipal services to the local community in a financially and environmentally sustainable manner. Basic municipal services is defined to be any service that is acceptable and reasonable to ensure the quality of life, dignity of life, and that would not endanger public health, safety, or the environment within that community. Kindly note that community is defined broadly to mean the body of persons, the residents of that community, and underlying the term residents. So when you look at residents, it does not make a distinction between age adults and children. That's the first point. So children qualify in that community. Then the second point is that it's a controversial one, but it's an important one, and it's going to link to my other point, that when it talks of community, there's an assumption that the community should have people that, for the lack of a better way to put it across, that are legally within that community. But one could argue, and it's part of the laws that we have, that how about unaccompanied children? Would they not qualify to be residents of a community entitled to service provision by the municipality when they are in South Africa in their unaccompanied? The question of whether documented or undocumented is another conversation for another day. But the point I wish to make is that there is an entitlement, and there's case law to support that children are to benefit whether they are accompanied or unaccompanied in the municipality. And there's an argument that could raise vulnerability for children that are unaccompanied, but it is an important one to make, which could require more research. Then the last definition to make is child, any person below the age of 18 years in terms of our constitution, which is section 28. But then when you look at our law, it defines young person and youth to be any person between the ages of 14 and 35 years. And when you look at that, you notice that some of our laws mention the participation of youth, the provision of youth in terms of doing A, B, C, D. One should, and we should get to understand that there are children between the ages of 14 and 18. And they qualify to be youth, but also they qualify to be children. So there's the inclusion of children in terms of the context of that law that provides for young person and youth and their participation in governance and in municipal service delivery and in terms of budgets and so forth. So there's the inclusion of children as a specifically vulnerable group in that context. In terms of vulnerability, it is broadly defined in terms of literature, even in the context of climate change, climate vulnerability, it's defined broadly. But the thread and the common elements that you find is to danger and risk and sensitivity, and the potential impact vis-a-vis adaptive capacity that would give you vulnerability. So we are looking at the susceptibility of children to danger, their fragility because of their developmental features and adaptability in terms of resisting risk, but also adaptability in the sense of building the mechanism to absorb shocks. Whilst vulnerability is subjective, it is important to note that there are so many factors and features that expose children to danger. So you have age, you have disability, you have gender, you have social status, and also immigration status or migration status for purposes of children that are living in South Africa and would require, the provision or the protection within the context of South Africa, specifically at the municipal level. It is important also to take note. Municipal Systems Act talks of vulnerability, but it links to specifically women, persons with disabilities, persons who cannot read and write, and other vulnerable groups in the urban environment. So one point to take note of is the traditional argument to say, once you have a law that provides for adults, it benefits children as well. And I don't agree to a greater extent to that argument, because under international law and even in South African law and policy, you have policies and laws that are specifically to women and specifically to persons with a disability and specifically to children. And what that tells you is that there is the need at the special needs and peculiarities of each different group. And in this sense, the broad categorization of saying vulnerable groups in the urban environment is good in terms of allowing municipalities to be innovative, but it's also bad in terms of where municipalities are not interpreting vulnerable groups in a more inclusive way. So there's a risk that children might fall through the cracks within vulnerable groups as a priority group. But also there's the need to realize that once you mention women, arguing that women were excluded within the confines of governance and service provision and persons with disabilities. But it could potentially mean that children are less important because they're not included together with women. So that argument needs to be looked closely, but I argue for the explicit mention of children in terms of their vulnerability in terms of our law. But then the section also talks about the need for municipalities to take into account the special needs of these groups, which is good, which is. I also need to draw to your attention to other laws and provisions in our South African law that talks specifically to vulnerability of women and vulnerability of girls, such as the National Development Plan, the Integrated Development, Urban Development Framework. I'll discuss them later on. I wish to point to your attention that for children, the risk is high when one looks at the psychological and physical harm that they experience in the urban space. Because, for instance, you look at children that are living and working on the streets and in public places and cities, and they're among the most physically visible people in cities, yet they are the most excluded group and difficult to protect. I say so because if you're in Johannesburg, if you're in Cape Town, if you're in Durban, there's a likelihood that you are going to meet children that are begging. You're likely going to meet children that have their parents begging, but the parents are going with children to do begging. So children that are living in the streets have a higher risk of exposure to danger, to harm, and street life in itself exposes them to crime, to abuse, exploitation, child labor. And in some instances, we have seen on social media how sometimes certain state agencies would get to a point of mistreating, and that is the level of vulnerability that comes with social media and different factors within our South African economy, within our South African geopolitical setting. Children are also, exposed to trafficking, especially when you look at the rural urban linkages, when you look at cross-border migration and how children can be cross borders for sexual exploitation into sexual markets and brothels within different cities, and that vulnerability is high within municipalities. And I raise this because it's happening within municipalities. But why should municipalities be concerned about children if Section 28 of the Constitution specifically looks at children as if they're within the confines of the national state? In my view and submission, the argument that says that children are only municipalities have a responsibility to children in terms of only childcare services, because that's what the Schedule 4 and 5 speak about of the Constitution. That argument may not hold much water for one reason, because you cannot expect the schedule to specifically mention children because it does not mention women and men. It doesn't mention adults. What the schedule has done is to the areas of competences which municipalities should then find themselves, empowered to operate. For instance, the safety of children, the provision of clean water, the provision of services that ensure that the community is clean and ensure that children are safe from danger, from risk, from rape, from abuse, and all those levels that you find in cities and in municipalities. So if you look at those municipal functional areas and competence, you can see that service provision is one of those key, and service provision should take into account of the vulnerabilities of children, which is one key argument that I forward and make in my argument. And speaking to age and vulnerability, in what has happened in Durban through the floods and which is linked to climate change. And cities have a mandate and they have functional competences in climate mitigation, risk reduction, climate adaptation, and management. And that has a link to the rights and interest and welfare of children and the well-being of children. So, the consequence is always that we have seen that access to education is limited, access to sexual and reproductive health and rights is always limited because of what has happened, and it gets to service delivery and vulnerability on. The second one, perhaps, would be controversial, is the COVID-19 situation and lockdowns and health emergencies, and the role that cities play to ensure service provision for children and also ensure, psychosocial support, protection, and ensure that children are protected from any danger that happens within the cities, and safety needs of children and all that kind of stuff that, children would be demanding in terms of law and policy. Studies have shown that during the COVID-19 lockdowns, children did not access school, risk of sexual exploitation and teenage pregnancies. And this is happening within the municipalities. So the question would be, why should the municipalities be concerned? And I'm going to explain and linking to international law and what is expected of South African municipalities in terms of our law, but in terms of international law. But there is also vulnerability that comes by the social status of children. And one may then argue to say, if children are living in slums, that's not the duty of the municipality. It is the responsibility of parents to ensure that children are in places that are conducive. But the argument I make is that whether children are living because it is the fault of the parents. Be the argument that says that there is the need for service provision to where the children are to ensure the best interest of the child in all matters concerning them. So you have poor sanitation, children that are living close to dump sites, and then that violates their rights, and then you have children that are exposed to air pollution and which is exposing their rights. So it affects their rights, and it is also a cost on the part of municipality, on the part of the government. So there's a need to really look at service provision and the need to protect children. The other component, which could be controversial as well, is to look at undocumented migrants, specifically undocumented children. And I don't know, I make an argument to say and promote undocumented migrants. Make a point to say, if an undocumented child who is an unaccompanied child is in South Africa and within a municipality, there's the need to ensure service provision to that child, because in terms of law, when you look at the Municipal Systems Act, there's no distinction in terms of service provision. Children that are born to undocumented migrant parents or undocumented people may end up being stateless. And this one can link to even South African children born to South African parents that are undocumented, being stateless and being unable to get service provision in terms of our law and unable to enjoy the rights of citizenship within South Africa. So that's another level that heightens exploitation, trafficking, and failure to this provision. So there's also another layer of disability, which links to children that are experiencing disabilities or living with a disability, and then the infrastructure within municipalities inaccessible to children, inaccessible in public spaces, inaccessible, and also communication barriers and access to information within municipalities for children. So that's one and another component and layer of vulnerability for children. When you look then in terms of our law and policy, why children are hidden in plain sight, is that in terms of international law, when you look at the UN Convention on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children, it speaks to state parties, yes. And state parties have a duty and obligation in terms of international law because they're the ones who sign in and they're signatories to international law. And South Africa is a signatory to the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and then the African Children's Charter. But there are provisions such as participation, Article 12, and provisions relating to the best interests of the child. Those do not only speak to states parties, but they speak to even, persons, which is natural and juristic persons. And cities are juristic persons. So what that implies is that in terms of international law relating to children's rights, there is a duty that pierces through the state and gets to cities on one level. But on the second level, one that in terms of our Bill of Rights, all the rights within the Constitution should be interpreted by all levels of government for the enjoyment of everyone, whether child or adults. That's the second level. And in terms of our Municipal Systems Act, like I indicated earlier on, the Integrated Urban Development Framework mentions vulnerability of women and young people, which include children, and takes into account the historical limitations and deprivations of opportunities. You also look at the Integrated Urban Development Framework. It recognizes the vulnerability of women and also not the pervasive fear of violence and crime as a barrier to urban opportunities within South Africa. So that recognition of vulnerability of women, the exclusion of mentioning children, but also young people, is there, and it's material, and it has to be taken into account at the local level, not necessarily, trying to say that municipalities are only a mandate in terms of childcare, but it goes beyond that. In conclusion, I need to make mention of the protection, participation, and provision continuum. The provision continuum speaks to the duty of budgeting, fundraising, and ensure the provision of socioeconomic rights or other rights that require budgeting and that require input from government. The participation one speaks to the need to provide platforms for children to participate in budgeting, in the development of IDPs that inform how the municipality is going to ensure service provision at the city level. So there's the need to create platforms, mechanisms, and spaces for children. Then the protection one speaks to protecting children from, number one, their parents, number two, the community, number three, state functionaries and other departments might cause or threaten harm to children. So the protection, participation, provision continuum goes like that, and it is the 3 Ps in terms of children's rights under international law, but also within the South African context. The last point to make is, are cities obliged and under a duty to be child friendly, child inclusive, and child sensitive? Absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of our law, in terms of our policies, there's the need to be child inclusive and integrate children's rights within the development of policies, within the implementation, within the monitoring, within the evaluation. And it is key within South Africa because it helps to fill in the gaps, but also help to build in mechanisms that resist shock or that are resistant to shock within the South African context. And what are for South African municipalities? I made the argument firstly that there's the need to move beyond integration into inclusion, because integration implies that you're taking vulnerable groups like children and then you try and fit them into pre-existing frameworks and infrastructure norms and standards, whereas inclusion goes beyond. You need to consider how to include children and those other priority groups in the design, in the planning stage, in budgeting, in planning for service delivery within the IDP. So it says that municipal managers, city managers, administrative, and anyone with the responsibility, be it the mayor and city councillors, they have the ensure that the architecture, the infrastructure of their city includes at policy level and at bylaw level the needs of children and their vulnerability, their safety within the city. I argue that inclusion is financially cheaper than integration because it starts from the beginning. And also it is long-term and there's intergenerational gains. Inclusive is participatory. It takes into account the best interests of the child, which is a constitutional imperative and a right for children, but also a principle in South Africa. And in closing, we need to also understand the fundraising and inclusive budgeting for children to ensure service delivery in terms of our laws and policies. Municipalities have a duty to ensure that they deliver on their basic services, ensure protection of individual and collective rights, deliver on fundamental, substantive, and procedural rights of women and girls, children, men, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. That's a mandate that is in the Constitution and the Municipal Structures and Systems Act. And municipalities have the constitutional mandate to frame policies that address the special needs of vulnerable groups, specifically children and persons with disabilities, children with disabilities. And there's the need to integrate the rights and the interests of children to ensure that children are protected from adverse impacts of climate change, of environmental degradation, and other levels that you find, because it's wide-ranging. The vulnerabilities of children is wide-ranging. One can talk of education and pick up on the vulnerabilities of children within the context of the sector and South Africa. One can pick the internet, use of internet, and then the abuse of children on using artificial intelligence and how they're exposed to pornography, they're exposed to material that is harmful to their well-being and that is damaging to their growth and development and survival. So all those are things, and all those are fundamental areas in my submission that falls within the confines of cities. And then you break them down in terms of the mandate of cities. This takes us to the conclusion of my presentation. I welcome any question and any feedback and any comment to improve. And in closing, I argue for the inclusion of children at municipal level on the basis of the competencies of cities, on the basis that children form part of the community and they deserve as a peculiar receive services that the municipality and services that the city provides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the presentation given to us by Mr. Rongedzayi Fambasayi, indicating to us really the vulnerability of this one specific group of in society, which is children, really asking what should cities be doing to ensure not only the participation of children, but also the protection of the rights of children as enshrined in the Constitution, and of course many instruments that he highlighted both from a national and an international perspective. What I will do on my side is I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to Professor Catherina Schenk to then go through with her presentation. Thank you very much.
Can you, okay, so can you see me? And I'm going to share it just now.
I can see you, Prof. I will let you know as soon as I can see the slides.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Anel, and thank you, Notlala, for the opportunity. And I'm really privileged to present some of our results that we've done with what we call the Clean City Town project, which was funded by the CSIR. And I'm very grateful to be able to share the results. This is actually the first time that we really share the results on a formal platform. It is unfortunate that we cannot share all the results, but some of it. So I'm just going to highlight some of the results that came from the study. And I'm very glad that there are municipalities and NGOs that can give us comments. Maybe we misunderstand certain things, and it's always good to present your results and get some good feedback on that. So I just want to mention the people that worked with me is Charlotte Nel, Professor Blau from Northwest University, and Dr. Lizette Grober, who was my postdoc. I just want to acknowledge my funders, and that's the University of the Western Cape, the Department of Science and Innovation, the National Research Foundation, and the Council for Science and Industrial Research. And then maybe I can just, before I start, I just want to mention this, that I think if we look at the two pictures, it's always, if we think of waste management, and I'm going to talk about that now, I think there's a huge difference when we think about waste management, and I think the people from the municipalities will immediately say to you the type of service delivery for these two areas are very different. In terms of sustainability and waste management, I think my presentation and my chair is focusing on the social aspects of sustainability. So, of course, we keep the environment and the economics into the picture, but that is the focus in terms of the social. And I think this is exactly why the chair was established, is to highlight what is happening in this space. So the aim of our research was to understand the perceived reasons for dirty cities and towns in South Africa. So why are there illegal dumping? Why are there still littering happened? And I think you will see today that I think we are just scratching the surface, and I really look forward to the discussion. The last household survey that was published last year indicated that 58% of households in South Africa has access to waste management. So it means then that that a lot of households are still not having waste management, and it decreased from the previous publication. So it is really sort of a worrying situation. So the research that we did was in 4 provinces. We worked with small lower income communities. We decided we're going to focus on lower income communities as we realized they are struggling the most with waste management. So on the northern side, we were involved in Mankweng and Matselapata. So Mankweng is the area between Polokwane and Sanin and just next to the University of Limpopo. And Matselapata is just down the road from Mankweng. And in particular, the area, and I will explain that a bit later, is there's no waste management services in that area. Then we focused on Philippopolis in the Free State, and I will talk about that. We had included Calvinia in the Northern Cape, and we included Drakenstein municipality in the Cape, as well as Visantekraal is one of the townships in Cape Town that we were involved in. So the townships we selected was Mbokweni and Paarl East in the Drakenstein municipality. And as you can see, the Drakenstein municipality is a good municipality. They won the prize in 2019 for the greenest and the cleanest town in the Western Cape. They have a weekly door-to-door waste collection by the municipality. They have daily mini drop-offs where people can go and put their excess waste. They provide bins and bags to all the households, except when it is in some of the areas where there's shacks, and they don't provide bins and bags to the backyard dwellers, and we will talk about that. And then we focused on Calvinia West, is the township in Calvinia. They have also a weekly door-to-door waste collection by the municipality, but the municipality doesn't provide anything, no bins, no bags. In Kopanong municipality, that is Philippopolis in the Free State, there are two townships that we dealt with. They had weekly door-to-door waste collection by the municipality. If and when the trucks are available, and if you follow the news, you would have heard that this municipality is one of the very bankrupt, very corrupt municipalities, so much so that they closed down the municipality. And what happened in the end, so although there were a regular weekly door-to-door waste collection, it's not happening anymore. And the concerned citizens of Philippopolis took over this function. So they still have the truck available. And if and when they have enough and sufficient money, they will collect the waste and they will take it to the dump site. I'm still on a WhatsApp group with the Philippopolis community, and it's very interesting to follow the whole thing around the waste because they really struggle. But the community and the farmers and everybody was coming to the plan, and they really try and support the waste collection, and they also took charge of the landfill site to be able to manage it. Then the last one was in Polokwane, and then Matselapata, Mankweng has part of Mankweng has waste collection, but Matselapata is one of the areas where there's absolutely no waste collection by the municipality. The people have to deal with their own waste. So we had a whole range of service delivery so that we can see how people are dealing with this issue. And then Visantekraal is part of the city of Cape Town, and they have regular waste collection, and they have bins and bags for the formal households, not the informal households. So this is just to give you an overview of the different studies that we've done. I'm fortunately not going to give you all the data, all the results from all of this. We did some quantitative data collection. We interviewed households on their perceptions and behavior around waste. We did some illegal dumping mapping that I will share with you. And we also did a household waste characterization study that I will also give you some information on. And then on the qualitative data, we had 322 semi-structured open-ended interviews with households around littering and illegal dumping. And we interviewed in the areas of Mankweng and Paarl. We interviewed the taxi drivers and commuters, the street vendors, the train commuters, and different stakeholders. And then, of course, we took lots of photos, and I will show you some of that. So maybe just for the beginning is to tell you that most of the people that we've interviewed, 88% lived in RDP houses. So there were not many people living in shacks. So in some of these rural areas, there's usually quite a lot of RDP houses, but there was many of them were overpopulated, although the average household was 4.3 people per household. But then we found that there were outliers, and in some of the households, they indicated that they are up to 29 persons. And when on deeper investigation, we realized that in Mankweng specifically, there was private student accommodation. Some of the people had extra rooms, which they rent out to students, and that's why the numbers was given. And in Paarl, we also then realized that there are many people living on the stands, and these are backyard dwellers. So it's not necessarily the household that is so big, but it's all the additional people. And it is mainly due to the shortage of housing. So some of the lessons we've learned was that a questionnaire should make provision for backyarders and additional people that live on the stands. As we know, many people make a living and they earn extra income by having backyarders. So the implications for waste management for the household was affected, because in these townships, the municipality will give a bin to a household and not to the backyard dwellers. So we've realized that many of the backyard dwellers doesn't know what to do with their waste, because they have to manage it themselves. If the household owner allow them to use the bin, they can use it, but otherwise they have to make their own plan, and this was part of some of the problems that we've experienced. So this is just to give you a picture of in Paarl, one of the areas you could see the illegal dumping in the open site in the middle. But I think what was interesting is to show you the backyarders and the backyard dwellings around the houses. You can't, in a way, see the houses. If you could see, here's the formal house, and then all the other structures. Now, some of the structures are the extension for the house, but many of these structures are actually for backyarders and having their income. Maybe just some statistics that we show you what people, we ask them about the regular waste collection. And in Calvinia, you can see most of the people said yes, their waste is collected always. And it is so, it was very regular. In Mankweng, you can see that many of the people, some of them said yes, there's regular waste collection, but the purple column was people from Matsela Pata who there's never waste collection. So it is just confirming what we sort of established before the time. And in Philippopolis, the people said often there were waste collection, but that was from the concerned citizens. It is not from the municipality. And then the one on the right is that that was in Paarl. They have very regular waste collection because the municipality does take the waste away. Okay, so maybe one of the first lessons we've learned for people not having good access with waste collection is storage of waste is a huge problem. And we can just imagine maybe if you don't have any access to waste collection, if the municipality tell you tomorrow, we're not coming to collect your waste and you will never have waste collection again, what do you do with your waste? How do you manage your waste? Or if it's irregular, I remember when we lived in Pretoria previously, there were times when the waste management was not very regular, and it was a major problem for where do you keep the waste and what do you do with it? So if you don't have any form of waste management, so people told us that they really struggle with the storage of waste. You can see the photo on the right, that was in Philippopolis, where there's no bins and bags that are given to the people. So they were told by the councillor to use the bags that they buy, the mealie meal or the dog food, and they must put it in that. So now you have one bag that you buy maybe per month, And if you use it for the waste, it's taken away. And then what do you use then? And now we are thinking about lower income communities. They can't necessarily buy their own bags. The other reason why people were opting, or why they were told to use that, is because they are they were saying that the dogs and the pigs will destroy the black bags, so they need to use that. So this was part of the problem. You can see in the numbers that it is only in Mbukweni, which is part of Paarl, where people have bins and where they have bags, but they mostly make use of the bins where they can store their waste. But in the other areas, people had to make other plans. If you look at Mankweng, 235 out of the 450 people said they need to make another plan because they don't have a bin or a bag or a storage situation for their waste. And it's the same in some of the other areas as well. So here we can see in Kalfinia, people bought, it's a farming community, so they will get maybe oil drums, which they will then use as a bin, and the municipality will come and fetch it on a weekly basis. So inside the house, they will store their waste in a small thing, and then they will put it out. And then once a week, when the municipality comes, they will put it out. But not everybody had a drum because they either could not access it or they couldn't afford it if they had to pay for it. Then on the right-hand side, I think one of the major issues was around nappies or diapers. This was at one of the houses where people put the nappies, and I think we can imagine it sometimes when there's a baby in the house. You will put the nappies in the bin, and then you will take the bin out and you will put it in the bin, the outside bin. But if you don't have an outside bin, what do you do with the nappy? It can't stay inside the house. And if you're in a shack or a small house, it's difficult to keep the nappies there. So this is what some of the people were doing. They will put the nappies in bags and hang it on the tree until they can take it wherever. And we will see what happens to the nappies. Okay, then, despite the fact that there are waste management in some of the areas, we found that in all of these areas, there was a major amount of illegal dumping. So we were wondering, so why is this really happening? And this was when we were busy with our study, that we find these children coming to dump. Their parents sent them with a wheelie bin. This was in Paarl. So firstly, this is Kalfinia. And although there's weekly waste removal, there was around close to 80 illegal dump sites, if we call it illegal dump sites, within the community. On closer look, we find the following on the dump sites. So we measured each one of them and we analyzed what was what was thrown away. And it was surprising, the first one, how many clothes people were throwing away. And what was interesting about this is that clothes can go into a bin or a bag. It is not something that is bulky, but people tend to throw it out on a dump site. And if you look at the right-hand corner, the river, that was mainly clothes that was also dumped in this river. We couldn't really get, and I will get back to it later, we couldn't really get to an answer. We tried to explore it, but this is definitely one of the areas that needs a good study, a further study, is the whole thing about textiles being dumped. And then in the middle, there's a photo of mostly rubble and garden waste that was thrown out at the notice board from the Hunter municipality to say you're not allowed to dump here. But this was exactly where people were dumping. And then on the left-hand corner, you can see this is the bulky waste, the mattresses, etc., that was thrown out. And mainly because people told us that they don't have the means to take it to the dump site. The municipality doesn't take it away. So on the weekly removal, they only take what is in your bin, or they only take what is in your bag that you've put out. But these type of waste is not taken away by the municipality. They regard it as the responsibility of the household. And the household doesn't have the means to do it. You must either get a bakkie or a pickup, or you must get somebody to come and take it away, and that usually costs some money, and that was difficult for them. So what happens here, the municipality will come once, maybe in 2 or 3 months, and they will come with and take it away. But it's, in the meantime, it is there. And as you can see, and I think our previous speaker was very eloquent in terms of the vulnerability of the children, because this is exactly where the children were playing. Then in Philippopolis, a little bit different. There was also many dump sites around the town. And as we've said, they don't have regular waste removal. Often the waste can't be taken away, and then the people have to take it to the field. But you could see what is interesting is that here people dump the waste around the town and not in the town. The town were actually very clean, but around the town in the riverbeds. And here is an open veld. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this is an open veld. So there were many little dumps here. And then there's a river, and there's also a river around the place where it was dumped. This is in the other township in Philippopolis, and it was exactly the same. The people were dumping all around the town. In the riverbed, there's a riverbed, and these are open velds around the town, and this is where they were throwing their waste away. So again, when we looked at what was in the illegal dump sites, it was on this left-hand side one, it was mainly garden waste or organic waste, but it starts usually as organic waste, and then people will throw bottles and other stuff there as well. And then the top right-hand corner is the bulky, what we refer to as the bulky waste. These are fridges, electronic stuff, microwave ovens, etc. Things that the municipality won't take away, that the community is supposed to go and dump or take somewhere, but they don't have the means to do that. So it becomes a dump within the community. And then what was very interesting in what we have found there was a lot of game bones of skulls, and because there's a few farmers, game farms in the area. And on an annual basis, when the hunters come, often they will bring some of the meat that cannot be sold they were professional hunters. And sometimes they cannot take, it depends on how the buck is killed or shot. And then they cannot sell it to the shops, and they will maybe sell it to the communities, or they will give it to the communities, and then the communities have to slaughter them, and they can't take the meat to the dump site, so it is thrown into the field. So this is a giraffe skull that you see there. So, and then in Matselapata was also the same. The area was actually very clean. But around the area were all the dump sites in the rivers, and specifically in the river beds. All of this are rivers, and that area is also rivers, and this is where the dump sites were. And on closer look on the left-hand side, you can see how clean the place is on the households, the standees. But this is what we found in the rivers, was all the nappies. And as we show you previously, it was difficult for the people to and this is an area where there's absolutely no waste management. So people are sitting with these nappies, and what do they do with it? They told us they can't bury it, they can't burn it. You cannot burn a nappy, it is wet. And then it's thrown into the river and washed away. And I think this is one of our major environmental problems that we currently have. And this is just to give you a picture of exactly in Matselapata where the diapers was thrown. And there wasn't much other stuff but diapers in this area. And it's also, of course, a problem for the animals because they eat it. So just a quick look at this. We did a household. I just want to show you this because it was actually a result, very interesting result. we did a household waste characterization where we asked the residents to divide in the following 10 categories. So this is just a picture to show you where we were busy doing that. We gave people bins to put in all the food waste. And here is just a picture where we did this. I will go fast, where we sort of were notified for 5 weeks, they had to separate their waste. And I just have to make the comment to say that the residents were brilliant in how they separate their waste in 10 categories. We gave them 10 bags for every week, and they had to separate the plastics and the papers and all the different, and the PET bottles and the food waste. And one of the reasons is we wanted to understand what is in the households and what is not in the households. So what is interesting, if you look at this, I'm only going to show you the one of Matselapata specifically. It is an area where there's, it is between Polokwane and Sanin, and it's close to Maguba's Kloof. So they have access to a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables and organic material. So you can see that 52% of what was of the waste that came out from the waste characterization was food waste. But what was very interesting was that only 5% of the waste was the diapers. And then they told us they're not keeping the diapers. They refused to keep the diapers for a week. So the diapers was in the veld, and the diapers was not in the household waste characterization. So if you do something like waste characterization study, you need to actually look at what is in the, you have to go and do a study on your illegal dumping as well, because this is what is not in the bags is in the veld. And it was the same also with the glass, and I will show that to you now. So what came out there is that in the other areas, the organics were less. In Calvinia, it was 20%. It's a dry area. In Paarl, it was only 21%, and in Philippolis, it was 29%. And we also got some very interesting things about their diet while we were doing that. And just a side note, in terms of vulnerabilities as well, we were actually quite concerned how monotonous people's diets were. High carb reliance in Calvinia, lots of bread bags, lots of bread and flour, potatoes. In Matselapata, there were lots of fruit and vegetables and very rich protein diets because they have access to that. In Paarl, there were lots of takeaways, and that was interesting because it's a town where they have access to all the takeaway shops. And in Philippolis, there were many maize meal and excessive amount of 2-liter cool drink bottles, and that came also out in all the other studies. So we asked the people, so what do you do with your waste? So people said they burn in Calvinia because they have waste collection, but if the waste is not collected, they burn it. In Matselapata, they burn the plastics and the metals. In Paarl, they burn also the uncollected waste. If anything happens so the waste is not collected, or if the overflow of the waste is not collected, they will burn it. In Philippolis, they will burn also the uncollected waste. Organics are buried. And then what do they dump? They dump the bulky waste, the garden waste, the C&D waste, textiles, the diapers, if they can, they dump it. This is all the bulky waste, and any waste types that are uncollected are dumped according to them. So there were more waste dumped than they would be able to manage it. And then sort of the only aspects, things that were reused, we asked them about reuse, and they said food in Calvinia and Philippolis, they keep the food for the dogs and the pigs. So, and it was interesting in Calvinia, we had very little food waste, and it was all given to the dogs, and also in Philippolis. Okay. And this was again, just to give you the photos of what is happening. And now, I think if we talk about vulnerabilities, this has taken the space and the rivers and the water that the community have to drink. It's going to the dam where the people are getting their water from. We went to the dam. There's a dam close to Matselapata, and they said that they have to replace the filters, have to be replaced all the time because the nappies get into the dam and into the filters. So it really creates massive problems for them. And this was also what we've seen previously again, how people thrown away the clothes, they burn it. And also in Matselapata, the glass, that was actually very little glass was coming out of the waste characterization, and there were all the glass in the veld at the taverns because there was no waste removal and it was just thrown. Interesting enough, none of the glass that was there was returnable bottles. The returnable bottles can go back to the taverns, can go back to the shops, but these were the non-returnable bottles. So what were our conclusions? Is that organic waste is most prominent from the household characterization study. Our waste fractions, problematic waste fractions are the bulky waste, the disposable diapers, the textiles, the garden waste, and the C&D waste. And municipalities need to think, and I will come back to that, need to think how they can assist communities with this. In the more affluent communities, people can rent a bakkie, or you can take it away yourself. You can take this to the dump site, and there are places available. But in lower income communities, this is not possible, and we could clearly see it in the communities. And it's also important to collect data from the illegal dump sites, and I will come back to that. And just maybe one more comment I want to make is in Paarl, they have mini drop-offs that they created for the community to drop off their excess waste, and for the people for the backyarders, as we refer them to take their waste that they cannot manage. But if these places, and like skips, I think we all know, we have seen it in communities, if a skip is not managed well, if a mini drop-off is not managed very well, it becomes another problem. So regular waste removal, these things need to be removed actually on a daily basis. Otherwise, it will be burnt. And on the left-hand side, you will see a mini drop-off that has been burned because the community couldn't take it anymore. So what is also important is we've also looked at the waste management issues in context of other problems. And I think we cannot only look at waste management. Here we asked the people in a priority list, what is most important in this community? Because we've realized that waste is maybe one of all the other problems these communities experience. And as you can see, in all these communities, housing was a major problem. And it came out in terms of overpopulation, not having enough space, or water. In Matselapata, for instance, the people said their first priority was water. They didn't have water anymore. It was dry. They had, the municipality had to bring them water on twice a week because the pipes were broken and it wasn't well kept. And so waste was not the major issue for the communities. They really need to attend to waste. Water was a problem. Roads were a problem. For instance, in Philippolis, roads was really a massive problem for the community because it's the only way they can get out of Philippolis is either to go to Koolsberg or to Bloemfontein. And if the roads were in a bad situation, then they couldn't even travel there. And then what was very interesting for us as well is that we asked people, what is the reason for dumping and littering? And I want to highlight everything in white is actually also coming from the literature in all the international studies and global studies. People would say it's a value system of the person. People are lazy, people don't want to do it, it's their personality or whatever. They would say people are not respectful, they don't care about themselves, they don't care about the community. There was lack of infrastructure. It's about bins and bags. There's too many bins, or too little, or too few, or too far, or not obvious enough. The lack of education and awareness is in the literature, and then also systemic structural poverty and inequalities and problems in the communities and sanitation. But the three in red are unique to the South African context, I haven't found that in any literature that people would say the community is, or the government is non-caring. The government doesn't care. And I think the context of where we are at the moment in South Africa, so people would say, why should I care if the government don't care? So why would I mind about a clean environment? Littering and dumping leads to job creation. I think we've all heard that people were saying it. Then, as you can see, it was literally only in Paul where it wasn't mentioned as a reason, but it came out later as one of the recommendations they made by saying people should create jobs through waste. But everybody, when we talk to the street vendors, when we talk to the taxi drivers, everybody was saying, but we create jobs when we waste or when we litter. And then also the theme 7 is related to xenophobia or people outside, and I think it links to the tension that we have between people. They would always refer to people from another place, from another province, from another country, and they blame them for the littering and the illegal dumping. And then my last slide before I get to the conclusions is just an interesting thing that we also discovered is that often we think that we communicate with the community via WhatsApp and Facebook, but actually very few people, or half of the people, don't access, cannot afford data. So as you can see, we asked them, do they use social media? And in most of the cases, only in Paarl, most of the people said yes, they can access social media. But the other towns, people just say we cannot afford it. And they use it really for when they need to use it. So other options was available in terms of, for Calvinia, for instance, they had a radio station and they said that is the best place to communicate with us because everybody listened to this particular community radio station. Okay, so my conclusion is illegal dumping, is it discriminate dumping or indiscriminate dumping? And we said it's not really indiscriminate, it's discriminate, people know, because they try to manage their waste. Service delivery, we find sometimes is a square peg in a round hole. There's service delivery, but it's not really fitting what is necessary for the community. We need to take a holistic view on waste management in terms of other service delivery issues. I think our disorganized communities that was referred to before in terms of poverty, inequalities, etc., is really a concerning issue. We felt we only scratched the surface. I think the mistrust in the government is a major concern. And we really need to think of innovative local solutions that we need to find in the communities. Textiles, we need to take that into consideration and really need to look into this, what is behind dumping textiles. And then I think our conclusion is that similar to what the previous speaker was referring to, is we need collaborative and community-based waste management. We really need to talk to the communities, get them involved, plan with them, what fits them, how can we take the waste away, how can it be managed, what is the best way of doing it. I think we assume and we think of certain traditional ways how to do that, but I think we need to plan with the community in all aspects. So we've developed a little picture there in terms of what we call collaborative engaged waste management. But this is provided there's a functional municipality. So my question, and I would like to hear some comments, is what if there is no functioning waste municipality? Can a community take the lead? Can they take the responsibility? I know there's lots of legal issues around that, but I would like to know that further. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Professor Schenk, thank you very much.
I'm so taken aback by the depth of this research project and what you managed to unlock and the eventual findings that you arrived at. But that said, and I know that I've mentioned this to you in private conversations before, that when I travel through South Africa, which my family and I tend to do as often as possible, and especially through smaller towns, not the urban areas, well, not the large towns and the metropolitan areas, we find that the illegal dump sites are growing every single time. So it's definitely a growing problem, mounting waste and a mounting problem. I'm not going to hijack the Q&A, so I have quite a few observations that I would like to share later on, but I would first like to invite our audience to raise a hand or to comment in the chat if they like. So I see that Seymour has a question. I'm not sure, Bothman, is that your question? Is that your name or is that your surname? But I think that your surname might be Seymour.
Hi, good afternoon. No, it's my name is Seymour Bothman. So Seymour is my first name. Thank you very much for the presentation. I enjoyed it a lot, and especially in terms of the field that I'm in. I'm a lecturer at the Tivet College, Boland College, lecturing public administration. So obviously both presentations are connected to the field that I'm in. And by the way, I also studied at Northwest University, so I just wanted to mention that as well. Okay, so I think with regards to waste management, Prof Schenk, thank you for that presentation. I think I've already spoken to not a lot of people, but I know one specific person that has tried to address this issue. So the idea that he has had, or what he has done in his community in Genadendal, here in just outside of Cape Town, is he is an environmentalist. First of all, he's teaching environmental studies, not studies, but he's focusing on environmental education at the school, at the private school in Greyton. But what I'm not sure if it's his idea, but what he's advocating is to create eco bricks. I'm not sure if you have heard about that, Prof Schenk. But the idea of an eco brick, obviously, but basically the eco brick is just using a plastic bottle and then filling it up with a lot of those small chip bags, for instance. And what he has done is, for instance, people in his community bring him these eco bricks. He uses it to build structures either at his home or within the community itself. And he has built structures with it previously. And then he obviously has an exchange. He has he worked it out a specific system where when people give him these eco bricks, and then he compensates them by giving them vegetables, because he's also a small scale farmer himself. So that's what he's doing in his community. The one thing that I would just wanted to add is that we should really look at how are we going to engage our local authorities in terms of this. I'm not sure, and yeah, but I'll give the rest of the people also a chance to make their comments or if they have any questions. But I think if we can start working together and building relationship with different institutions, we can start working on that. But I'm sure, Prof, your information is available
Yes.
on the memorandum that was shared, I believe. So I will maybe send you an email, and then we can keep in touch.
Can I quickly answer him around the eco bricks? I think there's a lot of variety comments or perceptions about eco bricks. There are some people that are saying no, because actually it is the plastic that goes back into the environment, and not in the environment, but even if you build with it, it doesn't really go away. But actually, we also understand that actually it creates an awareness for children because they're all involved. Actually, I know in one of the areas where we're involved at the moment, the person was also very excited because a whole school was bringing him eco bricks, and they're building a church and they're building lots of buildings. So there's it creates a lot of awareness. But I think it is also a concern that for some of the people that EcoBricks might not be the solution. But yes, okay, it creates awareness, it creates a context where people get involved and everybody works together, and that's what you want to, you want to achieve.
Thank you very much for the intervention, sharing of that information, and for the response, Rini. I'm turning to Kristen, and I think immediately after to Rivaldo. They can ask their questions, and I see that there was also an attempt to answer your question, Rini, in the chat, if you want to have a look later on. Raymond, I'm going to get back to you as soon as we've had Professor Schenk's response to Kristen and Rivaldo.
Thank you, Professor Nel. Prof, I just have, I'm going to make myself visible due to latency issues. So I'll just keep my mic, my camera off and unmute the mic. The question that I do have relates to the last point that you made, Professor, with regards to the collaborative instruments or collaborative governance. There's a strong focus with regards to my PhD study, and it relates to collaborative governance and the legal relevance of these emerging modes. My question relates to specifically accountability. As you stated in the question that you posed to us, when the municipality is not functioning and a civil society organization or a community-based organization or ratepayers association comes in and says, we are going to take over these different type of service delivery functions, specifically in this scenario related to waste. How do we then place this accountability if there aren't any legal instruments in place, be it a memorandum, be it in specifically your public-private partnerships, etc. Is there anything in your research that you've uncovered thus far which could bring light to these type of questions in terms of accountability specifically?
That's exactly why I brought it here. No, it's. I think that's exactly our concern: is what happens if there is no service delivery and there's also not a non-functioning municipality. And I think that's one of the things that we need to further research, because I know that there was the court case. I think it was in Koster or Swartruggens, or one of those areas where the community took over. And then the municipality went back to the court and they said that the community cannot do that. The Ratepayers Association or the business chamber cannot do that because who is accountable? So in the end, the municipality is the responsible person. I don't know if, I think according to the law, and Anel here, you must help, because this is something that we need to look at. What if there's a non-functioning community, and somebody should take that responsibility? The community needs to, waste management should happen, water provision should happen. What is the way forward? And we haven't looked at that yet. It will be great to have a response from this group. That's why I brought it here.
Yeah, and we hope that Kristen will come with all of the solutions in his PhD eventually, Rini. And I think we are all aware that many of these takeovers by community members nowadays also end up in court, exactly because of an uncomfortable situation arising within the municipality itself, but also some community members arguing that community representative groups only represent some and not everyone. And then obviously issues around liability should something go wrong. I think that's always the huge concern. Everything is fine so long things go well, but the moment, for example, there's an injury or there's a death by one of these serving community members, who's ultimately responsible, because the law speaks to the municipality and not the community. But I think this is a conversation that we should keep going. Rivaldo, your hand was up after that of Kristen. Kristen, your hand is still up. I don't know if you want to, if that's a legacy hand. Otherwise, you can just take it down and raise it again, unless you wanted to engage with Prof Schenk now. So Kristen, if you just can give me a sense. Okay, your hand is down. Rivaldo, the floor is yours.
Greetings all. I don't know if I actually have a question or a statement, but it refers to the IDP, the Integrated Development Plan, which is annual revision where the municipality goes to the people of the community and they ask questions based on how much must they charge for the rates, the taxes, and the service delivery that they provide. So it's also Section 34 of the Municipal Systems Act for those who want to go and research about it. This is basically where community members have a say in how things should be done, how the service delivery should take place, and how much they should charge. Now, referring to that, with this waste management in collecting of waste and disposal of waste, can we as the community inquire on that and say no, increase the rates and give us more bins, but since we have such a high poverty and unemployment rate, how can we make that possible or feasible instead of just getting more of these community or outreach programs to make sure that we reach these targets of having a cleaner and safer environment? That's all I can add for now. Thank you.
Marini, would you like to respond?
Yeah, no, I think that's the platform for the community to come and ask the questions. No, that's exactly why it is, and I hope that. But I think the IDP. My comment on the IDP usually is also this: is that I think we need more than the IDP from the municipality side. You know, the sort of just to have an annual meeting where people need to come and talk to. I think from the municipality side, the functioning community, it needs to engage much more. And I think it came out in the previous speaker as well. I think there should be a constant, if we really talk about collaborative, engaged service delivery, I think it should be on a different level. The IDP is one of the vehicles of engaging with the communities. But thank you for that comment.
Up next is Raymond van Vieren and then John.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bissy, and thank you for the platform. I had questions for both respective professors, but I think the one relating to Mr. Fambasayi, I will reserve the question via email. But Professor Schenk, the question I had for you is, based upon your research, is there any reasonable explanation for dumping in towns compared to those that were dumping outside of towns?
No, not really. I'm still wondering specifically. I think in Calvinia, it is interesting that we didn't find in any of the other towns, but Calvinia had certain places, as the one photo was showing, that people said, no dumping here. And that's exactly where the people were dumping. So it is in a way telling the municipality, but we don't know what to do with this. And I think that was, it is just a different sort of setup. While in the other communities, it was clear they want to get rid of the waste. They don't know what to do with it, so they dump it outside the waste. And I think in Calvinia, it was more visible because there is waste management. The waste management is very regular in terms of the household waste, but not in terms of the bulky waste and that. So maybe it's also a way of, making it more visible to the municipality. But it's a very good question, and it is a question we asked ourselves. So we are still involved in these communities, and we will still go back and ask them, why exactly here? If we ask the people, why are you dumping here? They said, this is what we do. This is what we do all these years. And we've seen it actually, that the children will come with a wheelbarrow and they will dump the stuff there. So this is sort of a different arrangement, but I can't give you a clear answer on why.
Ma'am, based on your like further slides going on, I think one of the themes I pointed out was that this could also perhaps be due to a non-collaborative community. So, I mean, if it was collaborative, and the fact that we are focusing on small towns, now I believe that one can come together as a town, as a small town and community, to arrange certain designated dumping sites to make it more accessible for everyone there, be it 2 or 3 minor dumping sites outside of the towns. So of course, when I speak of this, I speak of the fact that when we looked at the photo of where there was the dumping of diapers and so forth in the river, when you look closely in that photo, you can see there's so much open land just beyond the river. But why aren't we using that land? Why is no one allocating that land for to create perhaps another within close proximity dumping site?
Yeah. And what you say is very important. And I think that's why we say that I think this whole thing of collaboration is sort of a key word for people to talk about it. You know, sort of if the municipality or somebody or an NGO comes in and say, how are we going to manage the waste, and then organize something, you know, as you said, maybe they can say, okay, let's have this designated place where everybody can take this stuff to, and then we can manage it from there, you know, and sort of planning that. And I think it came out from each and every community where we were, that people feel there's no collaboration. I think everybody thinks it's only the municipality's responsibility, but people were saying they would really like to get involved in the planning, in the solutions around waste management. My feeling was that I think if the municipality or an NGO or somebody comes and they start talking to the community about it, they're going to come up with brilliant plans how to manage it. And they will make a plan what to do with it. So I agree with you. I think the collaboration issue is the key.
All right, thank you, ma'am. And then, sorry, just as a last comment, I don't really have an answer to the community-led service delivery, but what I do want to mention is, I think from, you know, what I've seen before as well, is that a lot of persons have kind of adopted the like a selfish nature, in that, you know, it's not my responsibility, it's another entity's responsibility. So the only thing to curb this would be, you know, non-profit organizations stepping in. And of course, they are the ones that seek a solution, since private persons wouldn't really go the extra mile if their counterparts, those fellow persons who live with them in a community, aren't contributing in some way equally towards improving the situation.
Thank you very much for that comment. I want to say something, Raymond. I think it's a brilliant comment. We often had the discussion amongst us that I think we need more NGOs in the environmental sphere. I think there's lots of NGOs for children and lots of NGOs for welfare issue. But I think that where there's really a need that can support the municipalities. I think in terms of organizing, in terms of collaboration, of getting people together, planning together. So for me, I see that if the money can come for NGOs that are really on the ground, really assisting the community to get organized. Because I think the previous speaker was saying that the municipalities have a big responsibility around children, etc. I cannot see that the municipalities are necessarily going to do that. I don't know where they have the manpower to do that. But NGOs can do it if they work in close collaboration with the municipality. And I think that relationship between municipalities and NGOs is maybe also a solution or can help, because you need people on the ground that help to organize and help to collaborate. So I think you're spot on for me as well.
Thank you for that, Trini. Thank you, Raymond. I am going to give John an opportunity now. His hand has been up for some time as well. So Raymond, if you want to come back to the conversation, you can just raise your hand again. John?
Thank you so much, Prof. It's really been an interesting 2 presentations, but I just want to it's not necessarily a question, just a comment, which I posted on the chat box, tied to the last question that Prof posted. and I'm just saying I really don't have a question. I mean, I don't have an answer to Prof's question, but one of the questions that randomly crossed my mind was, and probably I would love to hear Prof's comment on that. In instances where the communities decide to take over the role that is initially or legally the municipalities' role to provide waste management services. If the community decide to take over such services, and then who takes responsibility to maintain, let's say, the trucks, provide fuel, and can we perhaps see them, the communities, claiming back the expenses from the municipalities? For instance, in Poch, I've heard of this phenomenon. I don't know how true it is. If somebody, because of the potholes, they get a puncture or their tire gets messed up, they can fix it and then go claim from the municipality. Perhaps can we see something like that happening in terms of municipal I mean, in terms of waste management, where the communities take over the municipalities' responsibility?
Renee?
I think it's a very tricky question. I think unfortunately, I think the main process is actually that the government, the national government or the provincial government should actually come and take over the administration. You know better, Anel, should actually try and get the municipality running and under administration and see that it's managed. But to come to your question, I think the problem is, I think it's a spiral, a downward spiral in many ways, because what happens, for instance, in Philippopolis, because of the municipality that are not functioning, people don't pay their taxes. And what happened, for instance, there was that the municipality actually was closed down. The people couldn't go and pay their taxes. The people that pay cash couldn't even go to the office. So people were not paying their taxes at all. So they paid it to the concerned citizens who were delivering the services. So they're becoming more bankrupt than anything else. They couldn't even pay their water. For instance, the municipality, the community only got 30% of their water from Bloem Water, despite the fact that the Orange River was flooding and the dams were overflowing. They only can get 2 hours of water per day. So people were not paying their rates and taxes at all. So now the municipality doesn't have any funding. So I don't know about claiming from the municipality. This is a tricky one that I think from the legal side should be debated about. But here, people that just didn't pay their taxes, because they're not getting anything in any way. They don't get really water, and they don't really get electricity. So they were running their own business.
Thank you for that question, John.
On that one, it's a difficult one.
Yeah, no, it is a difficult one, and I think the way in which one would ideally want to frame it is rather talking about incentives and disincentives. If you really want to leverage finances and municipal finances, but I see that Nonhlanhla also has her hand up. Nonhlanhla, are you going to bring us solutions for the problems, or do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Prof. I do wish I could bring solutions, but mine is also a question, and it's of interest. I'm asking myself as I'm sitting here, if in the empirical study that was done, Prof, did you come across waste pickers? And the reason I'm asking this is I'm thinking to myself, often when we speak of the role of waste pickers in cities, not your secondary, but in our metros, then we see how waste pickers can actually play a positive role in ensuring that there's less dumping and there's less waste that you'd find on the street pavements and etc. So my question then becomes, are there any, or did at least you come across any within these communities? And if there were waste pickers in these areas, did you see less waste where they are waste pickers, or is it just all the same?
Thank you for the question. Notlala, the issue was, I think, for instance, Calvinia, there were individuals, they were not really waste pickers. In Paarl, they are waste pickers. But it was interesting, the waste pickers didn't really, the areas where we were involved in Paarl, the pickers were not really there because it was a bit too far from the buyback center. So a buyback center is a critical body, because they need to collect it and they need to take it to the buyback center. So they rather focus on the affluent areas where there's more waste, and they didn't really come to the lower income areas. But it was interesting that the people in the communities in Paarl, for instance, were saying to me that they would like to get involved in that. They would really like to find out how they can recycle, because it was possible. But it's again a way of organizing themselves or organizing the situation in the area. But they were not really waste pickers in that areas where we did the research. Calvinia were far away. It's 400 kilometers, and that was a problem, because to take your recyclables to Cape Town is extremely expensive. So there was one lady who was actually collecting glass, and she collects tins. And then once in 3 months, she will get a truck. She organized with one of the farmers. He will come and pick it up and he will take it to Cape Town. And she makes a little bit of money because the transport cost is so expensive. The same was in Philippolis. They started with the recycling, but financially it didn't work. I think you need sort of really an entrepreneur in that context where it's far away from the recyclers to make a living. I see that they're starting to think about it now again, but they really need somebody with a good business mind to see how it can work. So no, they were not directly waste pickers, and the same was in Matselapata. It was too far. There was a buyback center in the area, but it was too far for the people to walk there. So it is around about 15, 20 kilometers to the buyback center. So people didn't take it there. Although it was interesting when we were there, I think people became aware of tins are valuable, because at the moment for aluminium tins, you get between 10 and 14 rand a kilo. So people started to collect tins, and then they will get somebody to and take the tins to the buyback center. But yes, I agree with you. Waste pickers can play a tremendous role. But we need to facilitate that process as well, because you need a buyback center or somebody that can come and collect it from them or buy it from them.
Notlala, does that answer your question?
It was answered. Thank you very much, Prof.
Rini, so there's one topic that repetitively comes through, and I'm interested in having seen your slide on the subsistence needs, that it's not been one that the people mentioned, and that is mobility. It's as if you as a research team looking at the dynamics from the outside saw the need for improved, not only roads, it's not actually about roads, it's about mobility. So has the people mentioned that? Is it something that people can verbalize, the fact that there's a mobility challenge, or not?
They didn't verbalize it directly. It came out indirectly, you know, that in terms of mobility, I think the one thing is sort of transport of the waste to the landfill site, or waste to a buyback center, which they don't have, you know, sort of that they can't take the bulky waste to the landfill site, or they can't the collectibles to that. And I was all during the whole research, I said the most valuable thing that you find is a wheelbarrow, because everybody is that's your best thing of carrying your waste wherever you want to carry it. But no, mobility, they didn't verbalize it, but it's actually a strong theme overall that came out in a variety of ways, even if it's transport from Calvinia to Cape Town, or from Philippolis to Bloemfontein, or whatever it might be, but they didn't verbalize it directly.
Yeah, because what I find interesting, I mean, we have had quite a few conversations this afternoon around the relationship between the different stakeholders and actors. But we should also not forget, I think from where I stand, the relationship between processes and different societal dynamics, thinking about environmental health, food security. I mean, food being thrown away is a problem. And then mobility, and then obviously waste, which is the topic of today. So for me, it's very interesting to see how people might not necessarily be able to draw those links, but intuitively they realize, okay, we need to take the nappy bags out. And I don't think it's only because of the foul smell. Hopefully people also realize that there is a possible health risk. And I think that's the one other thing that your research results made me think of. Could you pick up that people also link the waste problem with potential or real health problems?
Well, yes, that link was made very strongly. That they said that's why they take the waste, and I think that was the question that he previously asked. I think that's why they take the waste out of the community, because it's a health problem. They want to not to see it. It's also a way of if it's out of sight, out of mind, sort of in a way, because it's outside the community. But it's also less of a health problem then, because it's not within the community. But as I said, because in Calvinia, I think they can afford to throw it in the town, because the municipality does come and clean say once a month or every 2 months or 3 months or whatever. They will send a front loader and they will pick it up and they will take it to the landfill site. But in the other communities, that's not the case, because there's no waste management. So then it's in the river outside where they can't see it. But I think, yes. You wanted to say?
Yeah, I think Rongedzayi's presentation earlier on, and then yours as well, just took me back to my pet interest, or one of my pet interests, which is the Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And a lot of what Rongedzayi spoke to really remind us of the duties that all three spheres of government have in relation to the children's right in the Constitution. But in your case, and your photos spoke a story of their own. I think there's red lights going on in terms of Section 24 of the Constitution, and perhaps by extension also Section 27, which deals with access to sufficient water and housing and health services, but specifically Section 24. I think I'm really concerned about municipalities not taking ownership of their duty to help ensure a health and safe environment, because many of the environmental things, and climate change being one, do not really have a home with either national, provincial or local government. But waste very, very specifically sits with municipalities. I mean, there are certain categories of waste that sits elsewhere. But when it gets to household waste management, that is the duty, prerogative and mandate of our municipalities. There's no unclarity about that. But that is definitely not bringing any solutions to the many problems we flagged today. It's just really making the point that this is so legally relevant and relevant for those of us working on environmental law and its intersection with local government. Yeah. Rini, I don't know if you have any yes.
Yeah, I just want to make the last point, and I think it's not only taking the responsibility for waste management, but it's also taking the responsibility for appropriate waste management, because I think that was for me the thing that stood out is that, let me just give you an example. In that Matsela Pata with no waste management, the municipality then at one stage said, okay, let's help the community and ask the community to bring their nappies to the main road. That was even a bigger mess, because the people will take the nappies to the road, and then the dogs will get into it, and the pigs will get into it, and the goats will get into it, and it was more. So people stopped doing that, and the municipality stopped doing that. But they didn't talk to the community, as exactly as was said previously. I think if you talk to the community, if you collaborate with the community, if you sit and say, what's the best way of doing it? Where's a good pickup point, or what's the best way of doing it, I think. And I think that's for me a bigger concern, is that municipalities also should really sit with their community and work out the best way of doing it. In Calvinia, I one day said something about, will it work if there's something, maybe something like a skip or something like this? And then one of the people said, no, you don't put down anything. Everything must move all the time, because as soon as you have a skip or a mini drop-off, it becomes a problem with drugs and children plays on it, and you have a moving system. So they know what is best for them.
No, that is extremely interesting, and we didn't have time, and we don't have time to go into this in detail today. But I think the bigger question really is how we can minimize waste, and what's the producer responsibility. That is the real problem here. In the consumeristic society that we live in, we generate too much waste. That's the starting point of the problem, I think. But then that said, also, having looked at those things that you discovered in your waste categorization, or you had a fancy word for that, and I apologize for my nappy generators making noise in the background, that some of these things are basic things, and that you can't really package otherwise than in plastic, also for safety reasons. So it's a vicious circle. But I would like to think that over time we will make more business with the waste hierarchy and just producing less waste to start with. And just the last point from my side, so the last few days have been the Stockholm conference, the largest environmental conference in the world, and it was so underplayed because of the war and so on. But one of the big themes that came out there is really this drive for more transformative environmental governance, and I would include the transformative waste management, that we think totally different about the whole waste cycle, but also the waste hierarchy, and how it speaks to all the different stakeholders, also the producers of the things that we consume and use.
I agree. I think that is the big focus. And let's see what the new extended producer responsibility framework will deliver, and let's hope it will lead to that. But I think this is something that we really, this is of course where the answer is, the main answer. But it doesn't take away that we shouldn't deliver proper services.
Yes, no, most definitely. That is for sure. Irini, I want to thank you, Professor Schenk, in absentia, also Rongedzayi Fambasayi for his presentation, which was very well prepared. And then there's a team behind these events, led this year by Nonhlanhla Nkobo. You've heard her voice, you've seen her face earlier. She was supported by Ladile Sekwakwa and by Kristen Besaidenhout. And for all of you who participated by asking questions and making comments in the chat, thank you very much. We did record this presentation. It goes onto YouTube for those of you that want to go and do a playback at some point, or that want to share it with someone who you think would also find the research findings that were shared interesting. And I hope that you will will join us for our next event. You will certainly be notified of that. And please also note that we've got a public lecture, prestige lecture coming up next week, presented by Professor Tracy Humby from Wits Law School, where she will be talking to the governance of change. And I hope to see some of your faces there, be it in person or virtually. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for the participation.
Thank you very much, Anel, and keep well. Thank you, everybody, for the questions and the interaction.